Synagogue Tech Forum. It's good to have you here. My name is David Paskin, your Torah Tech guy, and I am really, really thrilled to be with all of you this week. We have an interview that I did earlier in the week. They're not able to join us for the show live, but just a fascinating walk around. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. But before we do, I am so thrilled to have three dear friends with me here today, and more on the way, as I understand it. My understanding is that Leo's going to join us in a little bit. So let's make the circle around. Mr. Idelson, how you doing? I like the purple.
Thank you. The studio is coming along, and I'm looking forward to hearing the interview.
Did you end up giving the mic to your son from 2 weeks ago?
This is a different microphone that I'm trying, and the microphone for my son is in the box, but it hasn't left the house.
Okay. All right. Don't let go, whatever you do. Hey, Dave, how are you from Vancouver, BC?
Hi, David. Nice to see you as usual.
How are the truckers up there?
Oh, they're pretty quiet. We have a pretty mellow West Coast vibe out here. And it snowed, which is unusual in Vancouver, certainly in February. So there's not much traffic at all.
Nice. Mr. Attias. Is it Attias or Attias?
Attias.
Attias. I said it wrong. I apologize.
Mr.
Right. Attias, Marty, how are you?
I'm good. Keeping busy, doing, one of the things that I'm working on is an upgrade for a church that I'm working to upgrade their sound system. And I tell you what, getting equipment these days is like impossible.
Yeah.
Mixers, processors. It's just some stuff is like 8 to 10 to 12 weeks away.
It really is crazy, isn't it?
It is.
Apparently, this is true in the car industry also, that the chips that they're putting in cars, they can't even get that now.
Right.
It's wild. Yeah.
That's right.
Hey, you did a whole week, it seemed, last week on, was it wireless microphones or something like that? I saw you had a Monday informal thing, but then you had your regular show on Thursday. How was that? Am I right? Was it about wireless mics?
Yes, there's the last week's show, which is on Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, was about wireless microphones and RF frequencies, radio spectrum, and what you need to know about radio before and after you buy a wireless microphone. Why do you get interference? Why don't they work? Why are they noisy? So we went over all of that.
I just realized I had myself spotlit the entire time. Sorry. Everyone was staring at my ugly mug. I apologize. And I understand you have something big coming up next week. What's that about?
Well, so let me ask you, how many people do you have at your house of worship doing tech, involved in any way in your web streams? One.
Oh, we got two from Dave. Two and a half. Is that a half?
That's a half a person.
That's great. Well, so, and that's what most churches, synagogues, houses of worship have these days is 1, 2, maybe 3 people if they're lucky. And that's a very small group of people. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to fall into community with other people who work at other houses of worship to do tech and to be able to compare notes and see what everybody else is doing and try and keep encouraging going on, just have a sense of community? That's what we're going to talk about. How to create space and spirit for community among worship tech people.
Wow. I love that. Fantastic. Thursday nights are tough for me. That one I'm going to, I think, make an exception for and really try and come. That's fantastic, Marty. Thank you so much. So speaking of the number of people that you have on your team, as I mentioned at the top, I had the chance to interview the rabbi of the temple. The temple, which is just a fantastic name, is in Atlanta, Georgia. It is a very large, very historic temple. You'll see it as soon as we go inside the sanctuary. And it is a very well-to-do temple. So one of the things that I hope we'll talk about after the fact is how what you're about to see is not the norm. And how can we sort of take some of the big ideas from this implementation into our communities? I had the opportunity to speak to the Rabbi Peter Berg, who has someone who directs their technical program, and when they are at full steam, they have 9 people running their technical program. It's basically a television studio in a sanctuary, in a synagogue. It's really pretty amazing. And what I wanted to do is share that with you. It's a little bit. There was so much to go through. I had no idea. There was so much tech involved, and so many just big ideas, philosophical questions that came up. I want to share the video with you. Sit back, relax, get yourself a drink. It's about 50 minutes. And then we'll all come back and we'll sort of process what we see there. So I'll get it started. If for whatever reason you can't hear something, holler, let me know, but sit back, relax. This is The Temple with Rabbi Peter Berg. I am so excited to be able to talk today to Rabbi Peter Berg. Rabbi Berg is at The Temple, which has to be the greatest name for a synagogue ever. The Temple. And where are you located, Rabbi Berg?
We are in Atlanta, Georgia, right in the heart of the city, in Midtown Atlanta.
Atlanta, Georgia. Now, you posted on Facebook, and this is what caught my attention. You posted this shot on Facebook and said something to the effect of, to me, not publicly, but we must be the highest tech temple on the planet, or something like that. And that immediately got my attention, aside from the fact that your temple was in the movie Driving Miss Daisy, which is the movie that you're showing here. I really wanted to talk to you to hear about sort of what is the tech that makes your community tick, and why did you make the choices you made? So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you. And I just want to mention for all of our viewers that we also have Dan Fishman, and you'll introduce him and his role in all of this. And he's going to be doing the kind of play-by-play showing us on the camera. So Rabbi Berg, take it away.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. I'm so excited to show off our technology. This is sort of our first time showing it off to the world. So we're happy to be doing it on this program. So we, first of all, the sanctuary shot that you saw on the screen just a minute ago, this sanctuary was built in 1929. The temple is over 150 years old. This is our 3rd building. So a few weeks ago, this sanctuary basically had like 2 outlets. That was our technology. The microphone had.
That's fantastic. Wait.
Yeah.
Okay. So this was not just buying cameras. This was overhauling everything.
This is an overhaul. We had, we had 2 buttons for the microphone, on and off. And we, part of what we decided to do, and this actually came before COVID. Part of our strategic plan was to really make the technology in the sanctuary and throughout the building far more sophisticated. We wanted to be able to improve what we were doing with just, before COVID, a singular camera in the back of the sanctuary. COVID hit and it expedited everything. So this was supposed to be the end of a 5-year plan. And it, we ended up, within 2.5 to 3 years, building out what I really think is one of the most sophisticated technological installations in any synagogue anywhere.
So you had wanted to do this, and COVID, like for most of us, I think, really just pushed you forward.
It accelerated. So it was already in the strategic plan. COVID, I think it enabled us to fund it faster, and it enabled us to just be bolder. Now, of course, we were like everyone else. There were supply chain issues, and we had to deal with all of that. It could have been done sooner had we not had speakers stuck in Germany and those kinds of things. But most of it is here now, and Dan Fishman is our AV manager, and he makes it all tick, and he's here with us. So what I thought we'd do is we'd sort of walk you through a little bit of it. We're live now in the sanctuary. Dan is behind the camera. And what you see in front of you is our tech booth. That was actually not there. During most of COVID, particularly when we were in a full shutdown, we did everything on like a 6-foot table in the front of the sanctuary. with wires and cords everywhere. I mean, it was really, out of control. But you can see that we built this booth to look exactly like the sanctuary. It's made out of the material from the pews, and it looks like it's been there for 150 years. So it really fits.
Yeah, and Rabbi Berg, I just want to jump in because one of the themes that we've heard a number of times is struggles with how do we allow all of this technology to come into our sacred spaces, right? How do we integrate it so that it doesn't detract from the sanctity, but maybe even complement it? It looks like you spent quite a bit of time really thinking about that in how you designed the that AV spot.
Yeah. And we hired Dan worked with a company, and I won't do all the talking, but Dan, we hired a company called CTS out of Nashville. And they worked with us on everything. We had various subcontractors doing the labor and the electric, but the idea was, how do we preserve our sanctuary and at the same time make it functional and practical? So there are obviously, you see these giant screens. That's certainly not the way that it was. But let me point out a couple things. First of all, in the booth in the back, you're going to see a couple things. First of all, and Dan, please jump in. To the far right is lighting. That's where
there you go.
Go ahead, Dan. That's where we're able to.
I was just going to say, right. Just lighting control. Sure.
You go for it. Go for it, Dan.
Okay. Yeah. So we're still, as you can see, we're still moving in. We just commissioned everything about 7 or 10 days ago. So this is our lighting control here. And then we also have a front of house mix position here. And as Rabbi Berg was talking about, these consoles took, everything got stuck in transit, and we ended up having to make changes in equipment multiple times because things just weren't available.
What console did you end up with?
This is the Allen and Heath. It's their new D Live, and this is the 3500. Yep. And we also have a 2500 that's in our A for V studio or mix position. But it just gave us, a lot of flexibility. And again, the Yamahas that we initially were thinking of were not available. But we've been really happy with this console. It's very flexible and easy to use, and nice and colorful. And then you have, a few other little pieces here, but one of the big things we have added is a full 4K broadcast manned camera that is in this position, so that you can have this is a position that would be manned by someone or in a fixed position as it was used over the weekend, and then it's remote controlled from the control room as well, so you can do iris, focus, some of those things from the other control room. And then you'll see we have 2 cameras here, these 2 PTZs that are also 4K. Those are currently on sticks here or on tripods, but those will eventually be on a custom built just mount that will also be built to look like the rest of the sanctuary. So this similar colors and wood finishes, etc. And then the other big thing out here is we've added just an alternate camera shot there, so you can get essentially what most people would look at as like a jib shot from overhead or from the balcony there. So we've added that remote camera as well.
Is that also a PTZ?
That is a PTZ. Yep. And so one of the goals was to essentially have a system that we could scale up and down. So some services may require more personnel than others. And so we wanted to have the ability to have as much remote control as possible.
Before you take us
additional cameras too. Yeah.
Before you take us out, so what switcher are those all running into? What's kind of powering the video piece of this?
So the video piece is a Ross switcher, and it is. Give me a moment. It's their graphite, I think. I can when we get into the back control room, I can show you the actual switcher. So we have a Ross switcher, and then there's a router as well, a video and audio router that is running everything, and then all the audio is Dante. So so we have Dante in multiple places and positions, yep. So and the screens are run through the router and actually through a stream deck again with the goal of we can scale this so you could have as little as 2 people, maybe even 1 if you really wanted to push it, but you could have 2 people running the whole system. And then on full, when you have an engineer and a producer and a switcher, and when you put all the positions in place, you would have 9 technicians total.
So Rabbi Berg, one of the questions I'm going to come back to you about later is 9 members of a team just to get your services out. That's a huge, huge team. And so I'm curious about, when you feel that you'll want to have that whole team there, when you'll be more comfortable doing something pared down, and because your system needs to scale not only in the tools, in the tech, but also in the technicians. And it sounds like that's what you've done there.
Yeah, and there will be opportunities, for example, to do much of it from the booth in the back, where we certainly don't need all 9 people even now. But when we're talking about a major event and a major service, and we want we will be fully staffed. We have people cross-trained on various things, and we don't think it's going to take 9 people to there are plenty of things where we can do with 2 or 3 people.
Yeah, but there's something to be said for, like you said, when you've got that huge event, not having to hire an AV company to come in and do that work for you. You've got it all built right in, and you're ready to rock and roll.
Yeah. If you look here, remember I said we had 2 outlets. So now you have full plugins in 2 places. Here by the piano. So when we have a band, for example, everybody can plug in. And there's video input here, but there's also any instrument can plug in. And then also at the foot of the bema, there's another just a couple steps away. Dan, if you want to show the box on the floor, we have another input. So let's say that the band is on the floor. Other way, Dan. There's an input on the floor. He's leaving. Maybe he can't hear. Where the band can plug in as well. So a couple other things in the room that I just want to point out that you probably saw on the wall. The first is we installed. I'm sure there's a technical word, but sound barriers. So we did a full engineering. They used lasers in the room. In this room that was built 100 years ago, and it was not built for a microphone. There weren't microphones then, right? So Rabbi Mark stood up and he just used his voice like Rabbi Wise did in Madison Square Garden, and it worked. But what we've heard year after year is I can't hear. So we installed these mega speakers. Dan, if you can hear, you can tell us the branding on the speakers. I don't know that.
So he actually jumped out for a second, but he's coming back in right now.
Okay. So the speakers are, they're really unbelievable. So, every bar mitzvah kid, you could hear everything. Every, lay people who are not trained on microphones. This thing, with the joke, the first week we installed it was a bar mitzvah kid had a retainer, and we could hear like the grinding of the retainer. The sound was so good. But the sound buffers or barriers or whatever they're called, they were done by lasers so that they're strategically placed so that the sound bounces off in the exact correct place. You also saw in the sound booth, there were sort of 3 positions back there. To the right was the sound, in the middle was the PA amplification, and then just to the left, you can see a screen so that the sound guy can actually see the different screenshots, but there's also underneath it a communications box so that, like you would see on Broadway, where the sound person can talk to the entire communications team via headphone.
Right. So that screen on the left there looks like a multi-view coming out of your video switcher, and then and Dan can certainly, when he comes back up, we can ask him what kind of comms your tech folk are using, if it's Unity or something different. But that's fantastic.
Yeah. I have no earthly idea, but he'll tell us. And so you can see the speakers there, and there are if you look behind it, those huge subwoofers behind it. So that was an example where we made a decision that practicality is going to trump the look, right? It obviously would look better if they don't have those. Now they're painted white.
What I was just going to ask, the white ones that are hanging up there, is that?
Yeah, so those were not there. The speakers were built into the
Right.
walls; those are brand new, and those will be painted the off-white color of the sanctuary in a year when the warranty expires. But for the year, we can't do that. So it's likely that we can do that. You can see to the left of the screen; those are examples of some of the sound panels that we have installed, but they're all over. And then, of course, you can see the huge screens
Right.
that are everywhere. Those two screens. Those 10 by 10 LED panels. And so, we can show in live time the service. So what you have is you can see what the folks who are at home are seeing, but amplified, like if you were at like a large convention or something.
Right.
So you can see the bar mitzvah student huge. When the rabbi's giving the sermon, it's a split screen. Or for example, you have the liturgy on one side of the screen and the cantor on the other side of the screen.
One of the things that's interesting about, there's much to say about how technology can get in the way of intimacy. But one of the things that I think we've seen is that technology has actually allowed for moments of intimacy that we wouldn't have otherwise. If I'm sitting in your sanctuary toward the back, I can't see you up close. I can't see the Torah reading. I can't see the bar mitzvah child.
Yeah.
And so having that that camera shot and then having the screen that allows me to be a little closer, even though I'm not right there with you, has the potential, I think, to be really powerful.
Yeah, I'll give you another example. We have a camera that you can't see right now that we affectionately call Torah Cam, and
Sure.
So when there's a split screen of a bat mitzvah reading from the Torah and a shot, a frontal shot, and then split screen with a yad following the scroll, it's so emotional and powerful.
Yeah.
You watch people get teary. I mean, talk about intimacy. So as Dan said earlier, what we did was we took an existing conference room and we broke it up into 3 separate rooms. We chopped it up, we put in walls. So this was one long conference room. We joke at Montag was the name of the room because of the donor of the room. It was called Montag A and B because it was 2 rooms. Now we call it Montag AV, like audio visual. So here's room number 1, and this is the audio room. So I'm going to let Dan take it from here, but this is the right. So this is not the PA audio. This is the external audio. Dan, you want to give us a little tour here?
Sure. Yeah. So this would be our A for V mix. Again, we have not started using this room actually yet. We are still just producing. We produce 4 mixes off that front console, and then just using headphones. So that way we can split our mixes wherever we want them. So we have a broadcast mix, a mix that goes to our people who are participating from home or Zoom, whether it's Alfred Uri or a rabbi or a family member or whatever. They can come up and show up on the big screens, and so we send them a special mix. But eventually this will be our A for V. So in here you'll be able to mix, but our Pro Tools, we also have 16 tracks of Pro Tools HD as well that will be in here, so we can multi-track everything that we want and then be able to remix it later. So that's room number 1. You'll see there's some cameras in here as well that are
so
storage.
that's the mix that's going out to the live stream and for recording.
That's correct. If it was being used, that's what the purpose of this room
Gotcha.
would be. So you have an isolated room that you're not bothered by all the chatter in the room next door. So that's our A for V room.
And you saw on the left there was a little red box. That's so again, everybody can communicate, but the prevailing school of thought is that it needs to be a completely separate room.
Yeah. What are the comms that you're using, Dan?
That's a really good question, because I don't know the brand is. They are HelixNet, and they're all networked. So you actually use Cat5
Gotcha.
and PoE to run all of those. But we have 2 wireless comms, and then we have about 5 stations plus 3 hardwired stations that you can turn a speaker on, etc. But that way you can reach front of house or whatever you need to reach, and it has 4 channels. So you can have, video might be on one, production might be on another one, etc. So stage direction can be done without bothering your switcher or your engineer, etc. So then this is the control room. As you can see, there are essentially 6 positions in here, but on an average service, as we found, you can run it with 4 people here and 1 person at front of house audio, which works actually really well. But back here, you have a producer's desk. Let me step back. So here's a producer's desk. Here's where we deal with files and encoding and stuff like that. One of the things we're missing is our KVM system. So normally you wouldn't have all these computers and keyboards and stuff here, because you could have just one station that would basically control a rack full of computers. But right now we're doing it this way. You have graphics here, so we're using ProPresenter. This is a machine to pull people in from Zoom and to broadcast wherever we want. Your Stream Deck here, which controls your all of your what's on the screens. So you can if you press this here, it will switch what's on the screens in the room to program or graphics or our Oy vey button.
Wait, hold on. Well, I need to hear about the Oy vey button, but it looks like you're using it looks like you're using Companion there with Stream Deck.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Right. Okay. So you're bringing participants. Maybe if someone's having an aliyah, they're doing an English reading. You're bringing them in via Zoom, and then how are you grabbing them from Zoom and putting them into your system? Are you just screen scraping?
No, well, so what we're doing is we're taking an output, like currently it comes out of this computer, then it's going through a decimator, so it converts it from HDMI to SDI, and then we take that SDI and feed that into the router. Okay. And then once it's in our router, which is what Stream Deck is basically controlling what the router is doing, our Companion is, and so the router then takes that and we can send that video feed wherever we want.
Gotcha.
Essentially. And so, but yeah, so the Oy vey button is basically if you don't really know what else to do, or you're not sure what's supposed to be on the screens, if you hit this button, it will, you can't really see it here, but it will just basically put a Temple logo, ME1, the
panic button.
That's what's on the screen. Yeah, it's the panic button.
I love that.
I'm not sure what to do. Let me hit Oy vey.
It used to say, oh shit, but we made it.
I love that. I love that.
We changed it. So, but yeah, so you have your graphics position here, so they can run video or, slides as we're doing right now, or whatever kind of animated stuff. Then you have your engineer or camera ops here. So this is running the 3 PTZs are controlled here. Then you have some control over that Panasonic that's on the sticks out there on the tripod, the manned camera, so you can control iris and some other things, white balance here. And then we have 2 Marshall 4K POV cameras or box cameras that's what we use for the Torah cam, or we use it for other things as well. And this just gives us basically white balance and some other things we can change.
How do you have those box cameras mounted?
The box cameras are just on tripods. So
there's a tripod up on the bima overlooking the Torah. Gotcha.
That's correct.
We debated sort of mounting it on, the Ark. We just felt like that's really a historic piece. We just didn't feel right about it. So we're going to create a more visually pleasant, instead of a tripod, a monopod that really is a little more matches the decor a little better. Sure. And then we have a few cameras. So, for example, we get a really beautiful shot of like B'nai Mitzvah parents, close up during the service. And so that's sort of like a hidden camera. We have one that we can use, and we can move them around to get a shot of the accompanist. So occasionally we have the accompanist or the band on video. So that's the flexibility that those cameras allow us to do, like really beautiful close-up shots of specific things that we know we want to get.
Yeah, and then this last position here is the switcher itself. So this is the Ross switcher, and you can see we basically customized it for what we use, and we basically use 7 cameras normally, and then we have a couple of outputs out of our graphics. We can end up with up to 3 Zoom participants at one time, so that gives you an option to switch there. And then we have here, just when you're doing your different pips or picture in pictures that you want to use, you can go through these different banks. There's one that says Torah pip there, which there's no, let me see if I can put something, that was the wrong one, box 2. Yeah, well, yeah, anyway, so these are different, and there's, actually this one you can see by doing that, that one will show you, as Rabbi Berg was saying, if you look in ME3, you'll see that would be your slides and picture in picture with, say, the rabbi in that box on the left,
Right.
Would give you that kind of option. So that's all controlled from the switcher there.
Can you talk for a moment about I'm not familiar with the Ross versus like a Blackmagic ATEM Extreme or something like that.
Okay, so, well, one is, so the Ross is essentially, it's similar to basically like a modern version of or similar version to like a TriCaster. I don't know if you're familiar with the TriCasters.
Sure.
So this is a full broadcast 4K,
Okay.
essentially compatible system that is incredibly, the ATEMs are great, and I've used a few of those, but the difference here with this Ross is you just have a lot more flexibility, and it's a lot more customizable, but it's also, a different kind of a price point as well. So you're looking at, I believe, $40,000 for the switcher, something like that. So I mean, it is obviously,
Yeah, it's a whole
very
different ball game, of course.
thing.
Yeah.
And you'll see, unlike the 8. So then I was going to show you real quickly. We can step into here.
That's the equipment is in a climate-controlled room with glass doors.
Sure.
Yes. So you'll see this is the Ross actual hardware, or the brains of it are here. Then we also have some key pros. This is also, all this is part of the switcher and the router. And this is your router soft panel, which is this ultra core, so this is your router kind of, and life here. All this is router. Then this is all for your LED walls are here. This control here, obviously you get a little screen showing you what's on there. You have, this is basically getting us into the router from audio. So this is a Dante basically head that gets us from Dante to Maddie, which is the audio part of the actual router. These are your comms. And then you have Dante, this is the head of that, the mixer that's in the other room. So you have your Dante here, which is, and each one, so what they've done is every piece of equipment, so the comms are all run on a network. So this is its own basically closed network for the comms. Closed network for audio is here, and then closed network for video is here. And so each one runs on its own discrete network. And then you also have patch for your SDI, patching and that kind of thing, as well as a NAS. So we have a backup hard drive for all the video. But yeah, so that's kind of that's our control room closet, equipment closet, in there. So I don't know if any questions about that? Sorry, I ran through it real quickly.
No, it's amazing. Where are you sending this out to when you stream? Are you going to RTMP to your website? Are you just doing it Facebook and YouTube?
Well, currently we're actually just using, because it's what we've been comfortable with and what everybody is used to as we are growing into the system. We are currently doing it using just Zoom. And so we just basically send a very simple stream to Zoom as a webinar is currently what we do.
Just using like a virtual camera into Zoom?
Exactly. So we basically have, so we essentially, there is a, there is an NDI converter, which we've supposed to work, so we can take basically what would be the equivalent of an SDI stream, but network it. But we've never quite gotten that part to work yet. So currently we are just taking an SDI signal and converting it to HDMI. And then that becomes an input into this computer here that we can then send to wherever we want, whether it's, Zoom or Facebook or whatever. But eventually we will be using a separate service and software, probably some kind of an actual hardware box converter to give us both some consistency, but also less risk of any kind of buffering and all that kind of stuff. So we just haven't gotten there yet.
Dan, real quick, and then Rabbi Berg, I'm going to come back to you. Dan, what's your background? Are you with the temple? Or are you with an AV company?
Yeah, so I am the AV manager here at the temple, and my background is a little scattered. But I spent a good part of my adult life, about 20 years on the road as a drummer in a rock band, and then got off the road, started doing voiceovers and voice acting, but all along doing a lot of consulting, and I'd always been doing a lot of production work as far as music and audio and video throughout that entire career. And so it just was kind of it all kind of hit when COVID hit. The executive director here said, "Hey, can you help us with some, these challenges we're having?" And then here we are, 2 years later. And I'll just say all of this, or at least the real motivation or leverage to do all of this was in place long before. It had nothing to do with me. I mean, I was basically, all I did was build the initial system, which we used for a short time, and then, help design and kind of, this new system so it functioned for us. But the actual concept and belief in doing it in the first place did not come from me. That was all in existence, or I feel like the momentum was there prior to me even joining the temple.
Amazing. Dan, I'm gonna let you, if you want to, swing back in with Rabbi Berg. But Rabbi, go ahead. You wanted to say something, it sounds like.
Yeah, I would just say that. So Dan's got a team that works with him, and they're, people that come specifically for various events and services. They're not full time and here all the time, but people who are trained. We have people that specifically do cameras, specifically do switching, specifically do video production, and some are cross trained in both. And ideally, we'll have more of that. We're using our existing staff to do a lot of the Zoom function. People are sort of taking shifts doing that. So that's been fun. There's one more room that you don't need to see it. It's an empty room right now, but it's attached to these 3 rooms, and that is the audio and the podcast studio, which has not been built out yet. We currently have a podcast called The Podcast at the Temple, and we're doing it off of Dan. What's that equipment? It's
we're using Adobe Audition.
Adobe Audition is very simplistic, but we're going to have it in a room, in a really sophisticated equipment. We'll have a set in there, and we'll have also have a video studio. So, how many times a week does someone call and say, could you record a greeting for this event? Could you, so we'll have really a sophisticated place to do that with a set and a backdrop. I did forget to tell you one exciting thing that we're also doing that's not completed yet. The podium in the sanctuary was built in 1929 with obviously a microphone added later. But zero. It was very low, one person, not and we commissioned a woodworker who's just phenomenal to work with. You can't see the podium in there now because it was taken down for the event that we. It's on the lower pulpit, and to work with CTS with the AV people. So it's now a double podium where the two sides are electric, and you can, if it's a bar mitzvah kid or whatever it is, they can go up or down. It also will have screens built in, so that the rabbi and the cantor can see the technology that's being shown. When people, for example, from home type in a name in chat for a Misha Berach healing prayer, we'll just be able to see it right there instead of on an iPad that we're using right now. So that podium is also going to be integrated into the system, and we're really excited about that.
So I've worked with a lot of synagogues and communities, and I was, I think a lot of communities say, "Oh, our tech is the best." I was not sure about your claim. I'm now sure of your claim. That's incredibly impressive. Can you talk a little bit about why you did this? What were your goals, specifically when choosing not the specific technologies, but wanting to have multiple cameras, wanting to have access to Zoom, what you just said about being able to see people's comments on the screen. What are sort of the driving goals of this whole project?
So the real driving goal before COVID was we wanted to dramatically increase our participation in worship. It mostly at that time was in person, because nobody was thinking about at home, although we knew that we had people in hospitals that were live streaming and that kind of thing. And we were using the live stream platform, and we wanted to be able to do that. So we wanted to increase our participation and attendance. That was goal number one. We took a field trip with our clergy, again, before COVID, to Buckhead Church, which is a large church in the area. And we spent a full day with their tech team and their ministers, and it was just a really fun exchange. But we left saying, why? Because we're a synagogue, can we not do this? Why can only churches do this? Now, theirs is at a different level. We don't have smoke machines and all that kind of stuff. But we wanted to have that level of sophistication, so that we could reach more people, to enhance the experience at home and in the temple. And COVID said to us, more than ever, now is the time to do that. And we doubled down, and we said, we got one shot to do this. We can either do it right and do it well, or we can piece it together. Now, we did decide that we did not have the money at the time to do the whole building. So we focused on the sanctuary. We have an equally beautiful chapel that seats 250, 300 people, and it's modern and intimate and contemporary versus the big formal sanctuary. So what we did was we wired the whole building for future expansion we have a massive social hall that looks like a Ritz-Carlton social hall. Everybody has their events here. So we're wired for the social hall, wired for the chapel, but we didn't do that work right now.
Gotcha.
But we're ready to expand to it.
Yeah.
And we're blessed and we're fortunate here. We have an endowment that exceeds $36 million, and so we were able to do this work, which all in is going to total about $1.3 million. We're able to do this work through the generosity of the temple's endowment. Now, the endowment is only funding the hard costs, the hardware, the screen.
Right, you still have the people.
We still have the people, and our budget is going to have to assume that. And so, we built into the budget for the remainder of this year and for next year everything Dan is going to need to we have to sort of guesstimate how many positions do we need for this, and
Sure.
That's going to be a little guesswork for the next year, but we're excited about it. And so even though the endowment of the temple generously funded the $1.3 million, really upfront costs, there's a significant expenditure budgetarily moving forward on all the upkeep. And we haven't even talked, Dan, yet about when does this equipment have to be replaced? I mean, we haven't go that far.
Right. And so now we can actually see Dan. So thank you for that amazing tour, Dan. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about the balancing act between high production value. By the way, I'm glad that you went to visit that church. I think that we should all. I've actually been hanging out with the folks at Elevation Church, and they're not their tech team, but their digital ministry team, and I've learned a tremendous amount from them about what's involved in really creating a digital ministry. But could you talk a little bit about the balancing act between high production level, which clearly you've set yourselves up for, and engagement? How do you all use these tools to engage your participants rather than just putting on a nice movie that they can watch?
Well, I mean, I can speak to, just briefly. I think one of the things that we've been able to do is as Rabbi Berg said earlier, there, as much of like a sporting event it may seem by having these large screens, there is an intimacy there where you get to have this experience of seeing people, seeing the bar mitzvah, both whether it's the child or the parents, in a way that you can't see them normally in the sanctuary. And you have the choice. You can kind of experience the entire thing by looking at the bima, or you can look up and see kind of the screens there. It also, because we can now put all of the words and text and all the prayers on the screens, it avoids or removes the barrier of people looking down. It keeps people sort of their eyes and heads up and experiencing the service together. And then, that's the in-person experience that I think how it has been changed. I mean, also which we didn't talk about was the new speaker system, which provides really unbelievable sound anywhere in the space. I mean, that was a huge part of what we had to do with the technology. It was not just about the video, but it was creating this amazing audio. And I think, Peter, you may have talked about that earlier. I just lost my connection there for a moment.
Yeah.
But I was also going to mention, for the people at home, it now allows them to participate in a way, by having just the clarity, the image and the visuals that you are used to seeing on CNN or on NBC or anywhere else. You don't then go, oh, I'm watching a worship service, but now the video degrades to a point where it's just not as appealing to the eye. We've tried to create an experience where we remove that, right? So as many barriers as we can, as many barriers that we can remove, we want to, so that people can focus on just the worship service and not be distracted by the fact that, oh, that camera color is a little different than it was then, and I can't quite see them, or a little dark, or they're a little fuzzy, or whatever.
Right.
It removes all of that, so your brain is not distracted by, oh, it looks better. Those YouTube videos look better than my worship service. Now hopefully it's all kind of, maintaining that same quality so that people can really engage in that way.
What you just said about people's eyes looking up, that's actually quite fascinating, to think that for centuries we've gathered together, and yet we've had our eyes, our noses, looking down into a book as opposed to into each other's eyes or at each other. That's a really interesting piece of this puzzle that you seem to have thought about.
The other piece is that you can now see expression, which you can't see somebody's expression when you're in a 1,200 person sanctuary and sitting in row 26. And now you can see a tear in someone's eyes with a smile on their face. And that creates intimacy in a completely different way as well.
That's amazing. What you mentioned that you have a Zoom team, a group of people that are focused just on the Zoom piece. What are their roles?
So we took this. This happened during COVID, when we had to pivot like right away, and we just grabbed our entire staff and trained them and said, starting next week, we're on lockdown, and so you're all going to learn how to do Zoom. And that's actually carried over. So the Zoom chair, in the recording studio is still different temple staff members who are sort of taking shifts help and that's the least, you need the least experience for that. But that's the person who's, for example, before a bar mitzvah, talking to Uncle Harry, who's in Sacramento and isn't able to make the trip, and coaching them through how to turn their camera on and turn their camera off, and the rabbi is going to call you on, and then you're going to be on the big screen, but after the aliyah you have to turn your camera off, otherwise you'll still be there. And so they kind of work with our guests who we're bringing in, if we are bringing a guest into a service. And I will tell you that I still don't tire from it. It's even more powerful when they're on a big screen now, when Uncle Harry, who wouldn't be able to make it to a life cycle event, is not just there, but there in, Dan, how big are the screens?
10 feet by 10 feet. Yeah. So
it's
10 by 10
unbelievable.
screens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So their faces are, 5 feet tall.
Right. which sometimes can be scary, I think, but you're right. In a smaller space, that would be terrifying, having someone's head be that big.
Yeah. But right. But it is a big space. Yeah. And just real quickly, the other thing that's important about those, when you're talking about the Zoom operators or our Zoom techs, it's less of a technical background position and more of a liturgical understanding position. So they are the ones we are counting on to, have the correct slides, the correct words on the screen at the right times, being able to follow the service and make sure things are kind of, are keeping up with that. So they need to have some understanding of the prayers and of the Hebrew, et cetera, which is why we pulled from internal, people who are already familiar with the worship service, as opposed to going to outside techs.
Yeah, one of my mantras has been you need people who know their Torah and who know their tech.
Yes.
It's not enough to be able to just switch cameras or anything like that.
I'll tell you real quick. So we have another role that someone important here plays is Rabbi Lauren Felson Lapidus, who works very closely with Dan, one of our senior associate rabbi, and she sort of has taken on the role of, we call it creative director. And so she kind of works on a lot of the video production and the creative stuff that we're doing. But another interesting piece to all of this, and it adds another layer of preparation, is that whenever we are, for example, we have a Friday night service, and normally there's a cue sheet that the rabbis and the cantor and the accompanists use. There's a new column now which is about camera angle, and so we are thinking ahead of time and giving the tech team, you're going to want to use this camera for this and this shot for this, and the rabbi is going to be. So we have to think through all of the angles and the shots ahead of time. So it's like there's a whole production angle to it.
Right, and I imagine also to help where to look so that you can give eye contact to the folks that are at home in the Synagogue, so which camera is working. Yeah. Hey, I don't know if he can still hear us in the background, but I'm curious if you all have a tally light system so that you as clergy can see which camera is on at any given time.
Yeah. So my phone died. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
We'll
play by the rules here.
We don't have that. What we do is they are able to monitor things because we send a feed through Zoom to an iPad currently. That's our way of seeing those tallies. As Rabbi Berg said, we are building into this new podium will be 2 screens. So they'll have a confidence monitor to see what's on the actual screens that are behind them. Plus they will have a program monitor, or we could feed anything we wanted to it, but essentially it would be a program monitor or a multi-view so they can see exactly who's on camera at the time. Because we realized early on doing this, there were times where they weren't on camera, and didn't know that they needed, and so they did not need to stand there the entire time and try and look pretty. They had a moment to go find the right section of the Torah, or find a different thing, or do whatever they needed to do while the cantor was doing her portion, or whatever it might be. So we realized that reference option is really important for, like you're talking about, the tallies. But that's how we're going to solve that in the future. And currently we use iPads, and we just feed them the program feed through the iPad, and they're able to see that and know kind of what's being seen of them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. I have one more question about this, Rabbi Berg, and then I want to actually surprise you by asking you about something else that your temple is doing in what I would consider the tech realm. My question is, you all are clearly in a category of communities that has invested deeply in this, has the wherewithal to do so, and is able to make a long-term financial commitment to making this work. If you were speaking to communities that maybe don't have $1 million plus to put in, what have you learned over this process is one or some of the key elements that you would say that every synagogue is able to do and should be doing in order to, as you said earlier, sort of broaden your reach and really open the doors to Jewish prayer and learning?
I would say a couple things. One is that there are surely people in every synagogue of every size who care deeply about this and are even involved in the industry and may be willing to be donors. And I just think that that's an important piece. The more we talked about this, the more we learned how many people care about this and want to support it and want to be involved in it. The second is the most important factor in the whole thing has nothing to do with any singular piece of equipment. It has to do with the guy standing behind me. And Dan is the heart and the soul of this whole operation. And he is more valuable than any piece of equipment. We actually were doing a phenomenal job with crappy equipment. So I think investing in the one person who's going to help shepherd through this is really the most important thing. Someone who really gets this stuff, who wants to grow with you. And so to me, that's the most important part. And I think you can also start small. We all during COVID we made incremental changes. We were constantly like upgrading little things at a time, and you can see we still didn't even do it all. At some point, we said, okay, that's all we can do right now, so we're going to stop. But I think the metaphor of pre-wiring the whole building is a good metaphor because you do what you can and you get ready to expand and do bigger things, but nobody can do it all at once. None of us have unlimited money. So start small but think big.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, please go ahead, please.
And that is just that, as Rabbi Berg was saying, it is in the end, like you're just trying. It's a fairly simple process, and that is you're trying to tell a story, but you have to know the story ahead of time. So having someone who is intimately involved with the worship service and kind of gets into the weeds of how the worship service is working, and then what's the most important thing for the congregation. Like, so when we first approached this, it was right when COVID hit, and so there were certain things like people wanted to put in names for Mishavera, and they wanted to have names for Kaddish, and we thought, well, if they can't show up, how do we create that experience, or how do we do that? And is there, this is before we even, really knew what we were going to use Zoom. And then it was like, oh, well, we could use the chat function. Well, how do the clergy see the chats? Oh, well, then how do we figure that? And we slowly took what we felt were the most important parts to bring the community together and figure out how to do that with whatever resources we had. And so if that was a big TV and it started out with just a huge television and a camera and we were using a different stream service at the time, and we would put the chat up on that big screen and they would look at that and go, oh, I see so-and-so is, put in this name or they're sharing this info. So again, I think if you just figure out what story you're trying to tell and what's the most important, you can get by with it's pretty simple if you can find the equipment right now. I know that with supply chains, it's hard to find, but there's Sling, there's Blackmagic, there's OSB. There's a lot of different options that you can use that will give you a similar experience. Yes, the resolution's not the same and you don't get quite the capacity, but you can still engage.
Yeah, even like the
Right.
sling, which is not a, compared to the switcher, is not, an inexpensive piece of equipment anybody can get. And Dan has helped us do that. He helped us all along with inexpensive pieces along the way that gave us a really high quality.
Amazing. Dan, thank you so much. Rabbi Berg, I'm going to keep you for one more minute, but I just want to, Dan, I'm so grateful for your time, your expertise, and really walking us through and answering. I mean, I have a gazillion more questions, and I know that the entire panel will have more questions. So you'll probably be getting an email from me with a bunch of questions. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I got a lot of questions for you too.
Yeah, I bet.
Thank you guys. Thanks very much.
Thank you. So Rabbi Berg, I wanted to ask you about one other thing that I was perusing your website and I was really taken by the gathering.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what the gathering is?
Sure. Just as I wanted to give Rabbi Lapidus credit for her creative talent in our tech world, Rabbi Medwin gets the credit for this. We embarked on an engagement initiative. We were I believe the first congregation more than 10 years ago to form a department of engagement and to recalibrate our work in the realm of engagement and getting congregants engaged. So the gathering is a web platform designed by One Table. We're in partnership with them. We pay them a user fee, and it's designed particularly for us to connect our small groups. We have over 70 small groups at the temple, right, where we try to take a large synagogue and make it feel small. So people get connected through, who play mahjong, who go hiking, who read Israeli newspapers, who study, Bible, whatever it is. So any congregant can start a gathering thing, a Shabbat dinner, a study group, articles group, whatever it is, and they can post it, and we can, help people get together. So this year we're not doing a congregational Seder, for example. We're doing our entire Pesach experience vis-a-vis the gathering. So people who don't have a Seder to go to will get matched through this site.
Wow.
And so it's really, it's been a lot of fun. It is also expensive. I don't remember the cost. It's another investment that we made to try to take a large place and make it feel small. And we're now, we just made the decision to do it again for a second year. You pay by the year. And you work with One Table to customize it. So we made that decision because we don't feel like we want to see if we can have even more engagements through it.
Sure. We have been spending so much time thinking about live streaming and cameras and audio and all of that we sometimes forget that using technology to expand our communities, to nurture and build our communities, it's more than just Shabbos mornings. It's more than just Chagim or daily minions. It's every day. It's touching people where they are and reaching them in ways that are meaningful and profound for them. And sometimes that has to happen on their own terms. So I think what really grabbed me about the gathering was the fact that anyone can start their own gathering through this platform. That's just how empowering that is. It's just beautiful.
Right. In other words, we used to run synagogues top down. The rabbi or whatever said, this is what you're doing, and we're doing it. And now we're trying to run the synagogue from the bottom up. What do congregants want to do? What do members want to do? And what are you interested in? Not just what are we interested in? And we support the groups, but we don't run them. They're lay led. Yeah.
Just beautiful. Rabbi, you've been so generous with your time. I'm really, on behalf of the entire Tech Forum, I want to thank you. May we reach out? I know that Thursdays at 3 are not good for you. May we email you questions if we have any, and maybe we'll...
You can. I can try to find a Thursday sometime to do it. It's my hardest day because I have standing appointments.
No. Don't be silly. Making this time for us.
Yeah, reach out anytime. I sadly am not the tech rabbi, meaning I'm on a learning curve, and I've got people to help me. I believe in it with all my heart, and I'm so excited about it. But it doesn't come naturally to me. So that, I'm not going to be able to answer the technical questions about why we picked this switcher versus this switcher, but I can answer all the visionary questions and why we did it and how we did it.
But that is so, what you just said is so important, is that we don't have to have all the technological know-how. We have to have the vision and then gather people around who can help us implement it. That's exactly so powerful. Yeah. That's it. Thank you so much, Rabbi. Thank you.
I love your show. I'm so glad that you do this and really help so many people out. And it was an honor to be here today. Thank you.
Amazing. All right. Thank you.
Be well.
So there we go. I'm going to take myself off spotlight, and I'm going to stop talking because you just had to listen to a lot of me. And I'll just say that it was overwhelming. It was inspiring. I think there was a lot of deep thought put into that process, but I'm going to stop talking and let you all take it. So whoever wants to jump in. I know, Dave, you had some thoughts, and Leo, it's good to see you here.
Yeah, I'm alternately overwhelmed and intimidated. That's a budget beyond anything I could dream of. And it's very cool to see the racks of tech, but then I also think of when something goes wrong, who can fix it? Overall, it was a very nice tour of essentially a broadcast capable system, and where a vision and the technology and the budget came together to do something exceptional. And if you look at the sanctuary, it's beautifully integrated. It's not like ours where there's wires behind the Zoom camera that are bundled behind there. Everything's hidden and moved in a way that doesn't take away from the beauty of that old sanctuary.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't help but think about Marty when they were talking about the laser, how they use lasers to figure out the best sound beaming, or I didn't even understand it, but they put so much energy into not just the fancy cameras and all that, but really making sure that the audio, which we all know is the most important part, was
yeah, I was struck by their description of the importance of sound in the sanctuary. Just how important it is to be able to hear every word, regardless of who is saying it and at what volume they may be speaking and where they may be speaking from. And the laser thing, that's interesting. So, that helps them determine where all the reflections are. They'll put a laser where a speaker would be, and they'll shine it in different directions, and it reflects off of the walls, and they can see where reflections are, and they can figure out, well, I need to put an absorber panel like right there. They were left and right of the main speakers on those kind of parallel walls, which would be the first reflection. And, details like that, details are what makes the biggest difference in any kind of installation, whether it be sound or cameras or anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Leo, did you want to, it's good to see you, first of all. How's your head?
My head's fine. That's fine. I'm in Germany now.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I'm at the Jewish Christians Muslims conference, which you can see now. I've just brought up the screen, and it's now coming. It's just gone 10 o'clock at night, so we've finished for the evening, and everybody's gone. But I've been doing the live event from here today, for this week. It's quite interesting, very interesting. That was a fascinating tour, and as you said. And they talked about some of the equipment that they've used. It is quite different to some of the budgets that people I deal with, but it does show you the difference. And I think Marty touched on a really important point there. The in the room is going to sound brilliant. And when the in the room sounds really good, it makes a massive difference. I've worked in the sports industry for a long time, and we'll all be familiar with what it's like going into a stadium and you're hearing the echoes from everywhere, and you can't solve it. But it is really, really amazing to see that. I need to bring up my microphone. Thank you, Marty. I will just try and bring it up a bit. Hopefully that's going to make a bit of a difference. Sorry about that. There you go.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to throw in that I think the piece that stuck out to me the most was their discussion of how the technology that they're using makes everything smaller, makes it more intimate. The way he talked about a camera that can catch the parent of a bar bat mitzvah with a tear in their eye. I mean, it's almost, what I was telling my daughter about this, that it's like a TV station. They basically have a television station in their sanctuary, and to have the creative awareness to know how to use that right and how to use it well, I think is, as you said, it's more than half the challenge.
I think that's very true, and it's also going to be something where you need somebody to lead. You need to see how it works. You need how to see it. I thought the insight that they said where they visited what I would regard as a mega church, I don't know if that's the right term, and to see how they do it, because they are, from everything I've dealt with, when I go and watch some of the stuff that some of the mega churches do, they're definitely leading the way in certain areas. And that may not be the case that everybody likes some of the stuff they do, but you can see the difference. You can see where you can take things. You can see how things can be moved. And I think you're absolutely right. You know, we've had this discussion before, David. In some synagogues, you walk in, and when you first see screens, it's quite intimidating. It's quite intimidating to see that, especially when you come from a religion which says no technology on a Saturday. So you see this thing, and it's like, I can't get away from it. And then you see what the technology can enable you to do. And I think the first time anybody sees the Torah camera, they can look inside, or they can actually see the response on people's faces in the close-up. You can see that the technology dissolves. You don't actually see the technology anymore. You see what it's there to do. And I think that's the big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Marty, before you jump in, this is a comment for you. I love this. This is from Ray Franklin, who's watching. He says, Dr. Bonner told a priest who was bragging about the comfortable pews, but complained about the sound system. He said, Father, your ear to rear ratio is disproportionate. That's fantastic. Thank you for that, Ray.
That's great.
Wonderful. And a call out also to Leo. Aaron Goldstein says, it's often the people we work with that make the difference, and Leo has truly been one of those people. And he also mentions his twin community in Ukraine and how the real-time connection is palpable. It's just amazing. Sorry, Marty, I apologize.
No, that's all right. Yeah, you mentioned, and they mentioned as well, that it's not about the technology, it's about the people. And both the people who are watching what the technology is producing and the people who are using the technology to produce those images and those sounds. But something I've been talking about for a while now is that, we have these cameras and we have these microphones, and how do you choose what camera angle, shot, distance, zoom ratio to use at any particular point during a service? This camera, that camera. And I try to impress upon people that you're telling a story through images, right? You're telling a story. A story should have a beginning, a middle, a climax, an end. I mean, there's an arc. There's a line, a path through the story of a service. And ministers are very aware of this. They will assemble the parts of a service very intentionally to create an arc, right? A story arc. The images that are used should enhance that, should interpret that, and parallel that arc. And so when you're talking about catching a tear in the eye during a particular part of a service, when you're talking about catching somebody's reaction, doing a medium wide shot when during the important part of a sermon, catching a wide shot of the room during a different part of the service, they all have to be appropriate for the moment. And the people who are operating the equipment, switching the cameras, selecting, moving the cameras, they need to be aware of not just what's happening at the moment. They need to be aware of what's happening over the next 45 minutes, right? Because they are mentally planning the moves that they're going to be doing. And in order for them to have that information, they need to be involved in the planning of the service and in the execution of the service. It's one thing to say, to train people, say, these are what the knobs do. It's a different thing to say, this is how you use these knobs, right?
Yeah, the traditional Jewish service absolutely follows that arc that you were talking about. I've talked about it as a spiritual workout. If you think about a football game, you've generally got 50,000 people in the stands who desperately need exercise, watching 50 people on the field who really don't need exercise. And the same is true in our synagogues, our sanctuaries. You've got 200 or 20 people who really need spiritual exercise, watching 2 people, the rabbi and the cantor, who probably don't need all that much spiritual exercise, exercising. But that arc, that exercise arc, we start by stretching, and then we warm up, and then we hit our target heart rate at the Amidah, the standing prayer for us, and then we cool down with the concluding prayers. It's all about telling that story. Dave, I'm sorry, you wanted to jump in.
It's a very interesting conversation because it's so easy to get carried away with the capability of the technology to make a TV show. And the difference for us is really 2 things. One is the camera people versus PTZ, and who's cutting the show. Who's cutting the show is really key to getting the intention of it. And if you bring in somebody who doesn't know your service, who's going to cut, it doesn't feel in harmony in furthering the intention of the service. It's also, I really like seeing that they have a camera that's personed as well as some PTZs. Nothing takes me out of a service more than seeing a PTZ, move like a robot. And we always try to have a live camera person because you just feel that they are helping you see something important. And it's lovely to see that in spite of the racks of gear they still have a camera person behind there to catch those human moments that don't take you out of the moment, but take you deeper into the moment.
Yeah, can I'll follow up on that? And the comments come in from one of my rabbis, Aaron. Exactly what you've just said there, Dave. The services at the synagogue that I'm a member of, the Ark, they're only good because actually the person who's sitting behind the desk, Richard, who has been a member of the shul forever, I grew up with Richard. He knows the service inside out. He knows when to cut. He knows when to make it look good. He knows what to do. And you don't know he's there, but you really, really notice when he's not doing it because it's just a different level. And he's brought new people in and he's trained them to that level. And what he does, the technology that I put in with other people, it's great, it's good, whatever. But it doesn't actually make a service work. And Richard makes a service work at the synagogue that I'm a member of. And it's just amazing. And you're absolutely right. It's having people who understand the liturgy, who understand how the beat of the service works. I mean, you've just said it, David. You said there is a beat in a service. It definitely has times when you want to, like the shot, he uses the shot to go to the near to mid at certain points, which you need to have that focus. And then you need to be able to look at the choir. You need to know who's going to be doing the part there. And he just brings it together. And I think that sometimes I've seen it a lot when we put equipment in, and I'm sure Marty sees the same. It takes a bit of time before they get their flow of how their services work. And you need somebody like that.
I remember this summer, I was the not the summer, I'm sorry, for the high holidays, we had a whole not a whole tech team. We had 3 people who came into the synagogue where I work to do the whole high holiday thing for us. And we use vMix over there, which I'm not very familiar with, but we decided very quickly that we didn't want them cutting the service. We wanted someone who, as you said, knew the liturgy, knew the flow, to be able to do that. So they set me up with an iPad with vMix on it, and they showed me how to use vMix. I mean, there wasn't much for me to do, but how to switch scenes, and it worked brilliantly. And so not only is it important to know your stuff, but at the end there, the rabbi said that he, he's technically challenged. Even when you're technically challenged, thank God we live in a time now where a lot of this stuff has been made accessible and easy to learn, and we can do it no matter what. John, how are you? Good to see you.
Doing great. That was amazing.
Yeah, pretty wild, huh? You know what? So, John, this is for you. I don't know. It's not really for you, but when he said at the end that right now they're running all of that, every piece of equipment is just going into Zoom. That blew my mind a little bit, because I would never have thought that you would use all of that equipment on a platform like Zoom. You think of it for YouTube, for whatever, but I guess the intimacy that Zoom provides, and
yeah, I think the secret sauce is that like we're here, we're able to talk. It's the difference between a broadcast. And what struck me was, first I felt that I had fallen into Willy Wonka's chocolate factory of every possible thing you could want. But what drew me in was the insight that a non-technical person had, the communication they had with the people who were working with them. You were talking about how you really have to sense the service. You have to know the flow of it. And it's that exchange, to have that sort of conversation. The technology wasn't laid on top of the facility. It was integrated into the facility, and it was integrated into the process of what they do. And when you talked about the small groups and the groups from the bottom up, that's what the collaboration part, and obviously I have a Zoom prejudice because I use it a lot, but any of the collaboration tools that empower the end user. But I bet it looks beautiful, and I bet if they go out in 1080 like Office Hours 2.0, it's going to be amazing.
Yeah. I think it's also interesting that Leo put that comment in our chat. I hope they have a 1080 account. I don't know if they do. I have to assume that they do. But you're right that their technology is not laid over their sanctuary. They are working actively to integrate it in. They're building it in using the same wood paneling or whatever.
Well, I just love just saying, well, the speakers aren't the right color. They're still under warranty. Then we're going to paint them.
As I said, the event that I'm in at the moment today, so although I can't really move the cameras around because I'm not next to it, this is a Catholic monastery. Yes, I'm in a Catholic monastery that has put in all this tech. You can see the ceiling. Actually, if you're in the room, you'd see that circle is actually in green, and all the lights are in different colors and everything. And they put all this technology in because to use, and there's the AV is in here, and there's a grand piano to my left, and there's all of this sort of stuff. And there's 4 rooms like this in this monastery for youth and for using and for bringing things in. They know that this is the way that they will engage, maybe is the right word, I don't know, but work with people to bring them to this part of Germany. And it is quite amazing that people are spending or investing is probably a better description in their technology to be able to utilize it in worship.
But I think the investment is such a fraction of the payoff for it. I really think we're change happens on the edges. And I see what we saw today, and probably where you're working on, are the people who are at the edges. But I think this is going to become what the norm is. Could you imagine if, every synagogue or church had maybe not that level of a studio, but really had the ability to use that outreach? I mean, we know from our event conferences that we're doing here at the Monterey facility, their typical events, had 500 to 2,000. All those groups that now have done virtual added to it have just doubled the number of people who participate.
I think that's a really good point actually there, John. And that's the one, and I guess you touched on it earlier, David, in the question, that at the moment they're only doing it out to Zoom. And the thought in the back of my head is, well, you're only doing it to your own. That's just your congregation, your own synagogue. And where do they see the growth of that? They talked about a podcast. Well, a podcast will go out to many people that maybe not members. And it will be interesting to see. I missed the beginning because I was on my live event, so I don't know the size of their congregation. I don't know if they talked about that at all. But it's like, if you're going to be doing this, are you also looking to grow and show and expand your brand? That's a question.
You're right. I didn't even ask about that. I should have. That they're still keeping it sort of inside baseball, as it were. I don't know how large it is. I have to assume it's very large because they have a $36 million endowment, which allowed them to do this. So I have to assume that it's large enough, as it were. And is it Rabbi Goldstein? Is that Leo? Rabbi Aaron Goldstein?
Yeah, Aaron Goldstein.
Yeah, who's saying that so many people don't appreciate the investment is needed. It does take vision, leadership to make this happen. I have to say, confidence in the tech people. It's a true team game. And I also just wanted to mention that one of the things that synagogues are going to, and Jewish communities are going to have to start doing, and perhaps churches also, although I don't want to speak for them, is they're going to have to start building budgets that reflect this investment. It doesn't surprise me that up until now, we've all been scrounging and hoping for donors, and because none of us planned for this, so we couldn't build budgets around it. But now that we know that this is a valuable, this can be a valuable part of our ministry, of our work, of our sharing of Torah, we have to start building into our budgets, not only equipment, but as we've been talking about, the people power, the training, and all that other stuff. If you don't have to have a TV studio, but boy, if you could have a little podcast area, a podcast nook. I mean, they're going to have a podcast studio, but a podcast nook where the rabbi or the cantor could hop on once a week or do special video greetings. I don't know. There's just so much potential.
Well, it is interesting thinking of the budget, because I was with a group that resisted putting wireless around their campus because they didn't want people to get online. And clearly during COVID, they had to figure out how to get better bandwidth. It is a really change of direction. But Leo, I think the question you asked is growing. What does it mean to grow? Does it mean to get more people, or does it mean to get the people you have to grow in their commitment and involvement? And that's why I saw that community building was a perfect blend between the technology of outreach, but then the technology of community building.
So there's actually a really interesting article interrelated to this, and interrelated because the person who's actually in the article in the Jewish Chronicle, which is the main Jewish newspaper, or one of the main Jewish newspapers in the UK today, there's an article today to say that they've had 130 converts to liberal Judaism, and actually the person quoted is Aaron Goldstein in there, and they're people coming in, and they're coming in because they're seeing what synagogues are doing online, and they're getting that contact and they're getting that involvement. And to me, this is really interesting. I'm not saying we're stealing them from somewhere else, because I don't think that works. I think what you get is there's a lot of people out there that are coming to a faith, and if they come to a faith, and a rabbi I was talking to here was saying she doesn't mind if they come through Judaism and end up in Christianity. That's if the pathway works for them, then it works. And, that's about as far as I'm going to go on religion on this point. But the point that we're trying to say is that once you start showing people what you can offer, and whether it's in what we're talking about with religion, or in my previous life where we're talking about sport. Once you show people what you can offer and give them a connection, then they can get involved. And if you look at what they've done there in Atlanta, you say, this is great. This will give a connection. Maybe it'll get people into their door. Maybe it'll get people into a door somewhere else. Maybe it'll get people into the church roads down in a funny way that I'm not even sure that matters. It's like showing people what you're actually offering, and I think it's great what they've done.
That's awesome. Marty, I'm sorry. Did you want to jump in? You double clicked.
Nope, there we go. That's really interesting. I like what you said, Leo and John. It just, I was without, I didn't go to church or synagogue for decades, right? And I talked to a lot of other people too who don't. And what's holding you back? Well, okay, so there are people who are just not interested, but there are people who are interested, but there's this very uncomfortable feeling that, I got to get up early. I got to get dressed nice. I got to be with people I don't know. I don't know if I'm, going to be able to talk to people. I don't know if people are going to like proselytize to me. There's all this uncertainty. And then I remember walking into churches and even some synagogues where it's so big that the people up on the bima or the chancel are so far away, and the sound system doesn't work well, and they're doing their thing up there, and I'm sitting out here, and I don't know what's going on. But now you don't have to get anybody out of their house on Saturday or Sunday morning to go. Just get them online, and they can get a really good idea about what you have to offer and what you're about and what your congregation is like and what it's like to go to services.
Yeah. So next time, I actually did 2 interviews this week. One was with this community. The other was with the community in New Jersey. Very different, very, very different, smaller, beautiful. They actually approach this from a more traditional perspective, meaning Jewishly more traditional, and they came up with some really interesting solutions. So we haven't decided yet if that's what we'll do in a couple of weeks, but that's coming up also. Before we jump off, I just want to say one thing. There are 5 really good-looking white men on your screen right now.
I'm looking for them.
Yeah, no, you're one of them. But I got called out a couple of weeks ago for the fact that there isn't a lot of diversity, and it was rightly so. Not that it's my responsibility to have diversity here, but I want anyone who watches this to know that the only reason we're here is because we've chosen to be here, and we want you to choose to be here also. So whether you're however you want to define yourself, male, female, otherwise, gay, straight, black, right, anything, you are welcome to be a part of this conversation. That's all it is a conversation. And we want a diversity of opinions, a diversity of faces, a diversity of participants. So if you or someone who might want to contribute or be a part of this, please, please, please invite them, have them get in touch with one of us. You can find all of us everywhere. But we would love to welcome.
And I'd make it clear, the quality of your broadcast equipment is not the barrier. It's not, just because we've been doing it, well, I'm not normally on this camera, but it isn't.
Yeah, I was going to say, you look pretty awful today, actually, Leo.
Yeah, that's because I haven't had a shave for a few days. Thank you. I mean, busy doing a production.
I gotcha. All right, my friend. So next Thursday, we'll be with Marty on the Hybrid Ministries Forum, Hybrid Ministries Tech Forum, forgive me. And in 2 more weeks, we'll be right back here. Thanks, everybody.